There is something about being awake at 3 a.m. that is just different from being awake at any other time. Not in some dramatic sense, just in the way the world feels when you're in it at that hour. Everything that was running during the day has stopped. The noise, the movement, the constant low-level demand of being a person with things to do and people to respond to. All of that is off, and what's left is this particular kind of stillness that you don't really get access to at any other point in the day. Most people are asleep. The street outside is empty, or close to it. Your phone isn't producing anything new worth looking at, and you're just there, awake, in the middle of all that stillness, and your brain starts doing something it doesn't get to do much during waking hours. It starts actually going where it wants to go rather than where you've been directing it all day. And that can feel like a lot of things depending on the night and depending on what's been sitting under the surface, waiting for the noise to stop. I've had nights at that hour that felt almost peaceful, just me and whatever I was thinking about with no interruption. And I've had nights where the same conditions produced something that felt much heavier. The hour itself doesn't determine which one you get. It just clears the space for whatever was already there. During the day, your attention is distributed across a lot of things at once. There are tasks that need doing, conversations happening, a general background pressure of being available and responsive. Your brain is never really idle. It's always processing something external. And that constant processing keeps a lot of internal stuff pushed to the background where it can't quite reach you. At night, that changes. There's nothing external competing for your attention anymore, and your brain, which has been waiting all day to actually think about certain things, finally gets to. The stuff that was sitting underneath everything else starts surfacing. Not because it got bigger or more urgent overnight, just because the things that were covering it up are gone. This is why the thoughts you have at 3 a.m. tend to feel more intense than the same thoughts would during the day. A worry you managed to keep at a manageable distance while you were busy becomes harder to keep at that distance when there's nothing else in the room with it. A memory that surfaced briefly during the afternoon and got interrupted by something comes back at night, and this time nothing interrupts it. The thoughts themselves haven't changed. You're just finally alone with them in a way you weren't before, and that changes how they feel. The thoughts that come at 3 a.m. tend to have a few things in common. They're usually about people, someone you haven't spoken to in a while, and find yourself wondering about. Someone you said something to that you wish you'd said differently. Someone who used to be a regular part of your life and now isn't, and you're not entirely sure how that happened, or whether it was supposed to. The distance of the day makes these things easier to set aside, but at night they just come up and you sit with them whether you plan to or not. And then there's the future stuff. The things you haven't figured out yet, the decisions you've been putting off, the general ambient uncertainty of being a person whose life isn't fully settled. During the day, these things are manageable because you're moving and doing, and the forward momentum keeps them from feeling too heavy. At night when you're still, they just sit there in front of you at their actual size, and sometimes their actual size is bigger than you'd been allowing yourself to acknowledge. The past comes up too, usually in the form of specific moments rather than general periods. A particular conversation, a particular day, something that happened years ago that your brain has apparently decided is still worth revisiting. And the strange thing about these memories at night is that they don't always come with a clear feeling attached. Sometimes it's just the memory itself, vivid and present, and you're not sure whether you're sad about it or nostalgic or just awake and thinking, and this is where your mind went. The thing I find genuinely interesting about this hour is that most people who experience it regularly don't entirely hate it, which is a little strange when you consider that it often involves sitting alone with the exact thoughts you spend your waking hours trying not to think about too much. You'd expect it to be purely unpleasant, and sometimes it is, but a lot of the time there's something else mixed in that's harder to name. Part of it is the solitude. During the day, you're rarely fully alone even when nobody is physically with you. There are notifications and obligations and the general sense of being available to the world. At 3 a.m., that's genuinely gone, and there's a specific kind of rest that comes from being completely unreachable, even if the rest of what you're experiencing isn't particularly comfortable. Your brain is doing something real rather than just processing the surface level demands of a normal day, and even when what it's processing is heavy, there's something about that realness that feels different from the usual noise. And some of it is the permission the hour gives you to just feel things without having to do anything about them. During the day, there's an implicit pressure to be functional, to manage whatever you're feeling well enough to get on with things. At 3 a.m., nobody is expecting anything from you, and so you can just sit with whatever is there without needing to resolve it or move past it or turn it into something productive. That's rarer than it sounds, and I think that's part of why some people end up staying up later than they meant to, not because they're enjoying being tired, but because something about the hour feels like the only time they actually get to just be in their own head without an agenda. At some point, the night ends and the morning comes, and whatever was happening at 3 a.m. gets folded back into the regular shape of the day. The thoughts that felt so present a few hours ago become easier to manage again, not because anything changed, but because the conditions that were amplifying them are gone. You're back in the noise and the forward movement and the general business of being a functioning person, and the 3 a.m. version of yourself feels a little distant, like something that happened to someone who was almost you but had more time to think. And most people don't really talk about this part of their lives. It happens privately, in the dark, and then the day starts and there's nothing to show for it and no obvious place to put it in conversation, which is part of why it can feel so isolating when you're in it, this sense that everyone else is asleep and you're the only one awake having these thoughts, even though that's obviously not true. A lot of people are awake at that hour with their own version of the same thing going on. I don't think there's a way to resolve the 3 a.m. feeling or a reason you'd want to. It's just part of what it's like to be a person with a life that has some weight to it. The nights where your brain goes to those places are usually the nights where something actually needs your attention. And the fact that it took until 3 a.m. for you to have the space to give it that attention says something about how the rest of your time is being spent. Not as a criticism, just as an observation. The hour has a way of showing you what's actually there.